Welcome to today's deep dive. We're going to be looking into something pretty terrifying,
Yeah.
honestly. Fatal insomnia.
Yeah.
We've got a pretty good stack of sources to help us unpack all of
Well,
this. Medical websites like Verywell Health and patient.info,
right.
a scientific article that really digs deep into eye movements in the early stages of fatal familial insomnia, and a detailed report from the National Organization for Rare Disorders, or NORDAY.
All right.
And our mission today is to try to really understand fatal insomnia. What causes it? What are the symptoms? And ultimately, how does it lead to death?
I think this is something that really speaks to a primal fear.
Yeah.
The fear of losing your mind, of your body betraying you, and the science behind it is fascinating and unsettling.
Yeah, it is. It is unsettling. Just the name itself, fatal insomnia, is enough to send chills down your spine.
It is.
So let's start with the basics. What exactly is fatal insomnia?
So fatal insomnia, or FI, is a prion disease. This means it's caused by misfolded proteins in the brain. These rogue proteins are called prions, and they clump together and essentially disrupt the brain's ability to function. Think of it like a domino effect.
Okay.
One misfolded protein triggers others to misfold, leading to this cascade of damage.
So it's not just a single protein malfunctioning. It's like a chain reaction
Yeah.
of destruction
Exactly.
at a molecular level.
Exactly. And to make it even more frightening, there are two main forms of this disease: fatal familial insomnia, or FFI, which is inherited,
Right.
and sporadic fatal insomnia, SFI, which occurs randomly with no family history.
Oh, wow.
Both are incredibly rare, but SFI is even less common.
So in one case, you inherit this terrifying fate, and in the other, it just seems to strike out of nowhere.
Right.
That's scary. And what I find particularly unsettling is that prion diseases, like fatal insomnia, have a long incubation period.
Yes.
You can have these misfolded proteins lurking in your brain for years, even decades, without any symptoms.
That's right.
But once those symptoms start, the disease progresses rapidly.
Yeah, that's one of the hallmarks of prion diseases. It's like a ticking time bomb. It's silently and slowly wreaking havoc until it finally explodes.
Oh.
When it does, the effects are devastating.
Well, let's talk about those effects. I think most people can guess the most obvious symptom given the name.
Of course.
Yeah.
The most prominent symptom is progressive and relentless insomnia. But it's not just difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep.
Right.
We're talking about the complete inability to sleep,
Wow.
which leads to a cascade of physical and mental deterioration. It's a truly horrifying experience.
Like your own body is turning against you, denying you one of the most basic human needs, sleep. And from what we've read, it seems like the disease unfolds in 4 distinct stages,
That's right.
each more terrifying than the last.
Yes. The first stage is marked by increasing insomnia, often accompanied by anxiety, panic attacks, and even phobias. As the disease progresses to stage 2, hallucinations and panic attacks become more pronounced, and the insomnia intensifies.
So you're not only robbed of sleep, but your mind starts to play tricks on you, creating a living nightmare.
Yes, exactly.
Oh,
And then you enter stage 3, where sleep becomes completely impossible.
wow.
You experience drastic weight loss, and your body's basic functions start to go haywire.
That sounds like a complete unraveling of both mind and body.
That's a very accurate description.
Wow.
And sadly, the final stage brings dementia, leaving the individual unresponsive and ultimately leading to coma and death. It's a heartbreaking and terrifying journey.
It's hard to even imagine the terror and despair that someone must feel as they go through that progression.
Yeah.
And from what I've read, insomnia is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
There's a whole constellation of other symptoms,
Right.
many of them tied to the autonomic nervous system going haywire.
You're absolutely right. The autonomic nervous system controls all those vital functions we don't consciously think about: breathing, heart rate, digestion, temperature regulation. As the disease progresses, we see things like fever, rapid heart rate, high blood pressure, and profuse sweating. Some individuals experience problems with swallowing, slurred speech, or difficulty coordinating movements.
So it's not just the mind that's under attack. It's like the disease is systematically shutting down the entire body.
It is.
And I can't even begin to imagine the psychological toll this must take on someone. The fear and anxiety, knowing that your own body is betraying you.
The psychological impact of this disease is profound. Anxiety and depression are very common, as are the hallucinations and paranoia we mentioned earlier.
Right.
It's truly a harrowing experience, a waking nightmare with no escape.
This is all so disturbing. It makes you appreciate just how fragile we are.
Mm-hmm.
But let's Let's try to understand the mechanics of this disease. What exactly is happening in the brain that causes this cascade of horrifying symptoms?
The key lies in understanding which part of the brain is primarily attacked. The thalamus.
The thalamus.
Yes.
I vaguely remember that from biology class. Can you remind me what that part of the brain does?
Think of the thalamus as the brain's central relay station.
Okay.
It's a deep brain structure responsible for regulating a wide range of crucial functions, including sleep, sensory input, motor signals, alertness, and even consciousness.
So when the thalamus is compromised, it's like the control center is malfunctioning, sending out garbled signals,
Yeah,
causing all of these terrifying symptoms.
exactly. In fatal insomnia, those misfolded prion proteins accumulate in the thalamus,
Okay.
causing progressive damage and death of neurons. And as the damage spreads, the symptoms worsen.
So the more prions accumulate, the more the thalamus deteriorates,
Yeah.
and the more severe the symptoms become.
Yeah.
It's a vicious cycle of destruction.
Precisely. And the thalamus damage also helps to explain many of the specific symptoms we see in fatal insomnia. The insomnia, the autonomic dysfunction, the motor problems all stem from the progressive deterioration of this crucial brain structure.
It's remarkable and disturbing how one tiny structure in the brain can have such a profound impact on the entire body.
Yeah.
Are there any specific observations about how these prions attack the brain that help us understand this better?
There is one particularly interesting observation related to eye movements.
Okay.
Studies have shown that people with fatal insomnia often exhibit something called excessive saccadic intrusions, even in the early stages of the disease.
Saccadic intrusions. That sounds pretty technical. What exactly does that mean?
So saccades are those rapid, jerky eye movements we make when we shift our gaze from one point to another.
Okay.
Everyone has them. But in fatal insomnia, these saccades become much more frequent and intrusive, making it difficult for the person to maintain steady fixation on an object. Their eyes are constantly jumping around, even when they're trying to focus.
Wow, that must be incredibly disorienting and frustrating on top of everything else they're going through.
Exactly.
It's like their own eyes are betraying them.
Exactly. And this further underscores the thalamus's crucial role in controlling even the most basic functions, like how we move our eyes.
This deep dive into the symptoms and brain mechanics of fatal insomnia has been truly eye-opening
Yeah.
in a rather unsettling way. Now I think it's time to take a closer look at how this devastating disease is diagnosed.
Of course. Diagnosing fatal insomnia can be tricky, especially in the early stages, because its symptoms can mimic other conditions.
Right.
And its rarity makes it less likely to be considered initially.
So it's a bit of a diagnostic puzzle.
Yeah.
What tools do doctors use to piece together this diagnosis?
Several tools are used. Sleep studies, called polysomnography, can reveal abnormalities in sleep patterns and the different sleep stages. PET scans can also provide valuable insights, particularly in detecting the characteristic reduction in metabolic activity in the thalamus.
So the PE scan can essentially reveal the damage that's already been done to the thalamus by those rogue prions. And I'm guessing genetic testing also plays a role, especially for the familial form of the disease.
Absolutely. For FFI, genetic testing is crucial.
Right.
It can identify the specific PRNP gene mutation associated with the disease, confirming the diagnosis. However, genetic testing is less helpful in cases of SFI because, as we discussed, there's no known genetic cause for that form.
So even with these advanced tools, diagnosis remains a challenge. And sadly, from what we've discussed so far, it sounds like even if you do get a diagnosis of fatal insomnia, the outlook isn't very hopeful.
That's the most heartbreaking aspect of this disease. There is currently no cure for fatal insomnia.
Wow.
Treatment is focused on managing the symptoms and providing comfort care, trying to make the patient as comfortable as possible as the disease takes its course.
It's a devastating reality for those facing this rare and terrifying disease. Before we delve into the specifics of FFI and SFI, I want to touch on something that's come up a few times in our research: how long a person can actually go without sleep.
It's a question that speaks to our morbid curiosity, but it also highlights the fundamental importance of sleep for human survival.
So what is the longest recorded instance of someone going without sleep?
The longest recorded instance of sleep deprivation was a scientific experiment where a teenager voluntarily stayed awake for 264 hours. That's just over 10 days.
10 days. It's hard to fathom how exhausted he must have been.
It's an extreme example and definitely not something anyone should try to replicate. It's important to stress that chronic sleep deprivation, even in less extreme forms, has very serious consequences for our health.
That's a good point to end part one of our deep dives. We've learned that fatal insomnia, whether inherited or sporadic, is a devastating disease with a truly horrifying progression. We've explored the chilling symptoms, from the obvious insomnia to the terrifying autonomic nervous system dysfunction, and we've peered into the brain to understand how damage to the thalamus, that central relay station, orchestrates this tragic cascade of events. We've even touched on the limits of human endurance when it comes to sleep deprivation. But there's much more to uncover about this rare and relentless disease. Stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive into fatal insomnia.
So now that we have a general understanding of the truly devastating nature of fatal insomnia, let's delve a little deeper into the specifics of its two forms,
Okay.
starting with fatal familial insomnia, or FFI.
FFI, the inherited form of this horrifying disease. It's hard to imagine anything more terrifying than knowing that this deadly condition runs in your family.
Right.
How exactly is this genetic nightmare passed down through generations?
So FFI is inherited in an autosomal dominant pattern. This means that a single copy of the mutated gene is enough to cause the disease.
Wow.
If one parent carries this gene mutation, there's a 50% chance that each of their children will inherit it.
Oh, gosh.
It's like flipping a coin with every pregnancy, but the stakes are unimaginably high.
A 50-50 chance of passing on such a horrific fate to your children?
Yeah.
The weight of that knowledge must be incredibly heavy
Yes.
for families affected by FFI. And it all boils down to a specific gene mutation, the PRNP gene, which we touched on earlier.
That's right. This gene provides the instructions for making the prion protein. In FFI, there's a single tiny error in the DNA sequence of the PRNP gene.
Okay.
This error leads to the substitution of one amino acid for another in the prion protein. It's like swapping out one tiny building block in a complex structure, but the consequences are catastrophic.
So this seemingly insignificant substitution causes the prion protein to misfold, setting off that chain reaction of destruction in the brain.
Precisely. The substituted amino acid disrupts the delicate balance of forces that hold the protein in its correct shape.
Oh. Instead of folding into its normal, healthy form, the protein twists and contorts into an abnormal shape, becoming a deadly prion. And as we discussed earlier, this triggers a cascade of misfolding in other prion proteins, spreading the damage throughout the brain.
It's amazing and tragic how one tiny alteration in our genetic code can have such profound and devastating effects.
It's incredible.
It really highlights the incredible complexity and fragility of our biology.
It certainly does. And with FFI, the consequences of this tiny error are irreversible.
Now let's shift our focus to the other form of fatal insomnia, the one that seems to appear out of nowhere, sporadic fatal insomnia, or SFI.
Right.
This form of the disease is shrouded in even more mystery and fear, isn't it?
Absolutely. SFI appears randomly with no identifiable pattern or family history to help us understand its origins.
So there's no genetic test to screen for SFI, no way to predict who might be at risk. That must be terrifying, not knowing if this time bomb is ticking inside you. It is. It's a diagnosis that comes out of the blue. A thief in the night, stealing your sleep, and ultimately your life.
And to add another layer of fear, it seems that even though there's no known genetic cause for SFI, it still involves the same prion protein going rogue and wreaking havoc in the thalamus.
That's right. Despite the lack of a known genetic mutation in SFI, the disease still involves damage to the thalamus and the same type of misfolded prion protein found in FFI.
Oh, wow.
The difference is that we don't yet understand what triggers the misfolding in these sporadic cases.
So essentially, both forms of fatal insomnia, FFI and SFI, lead to the same horrifying endpoint, just through different pathways. It's like two roads leading to the same terrifying destination.
That's a good analogy. Both forms result in the progressive destruction of the thalamus and the cascade of devastating symptoms we've discussed.
Right.
The fact that something as seemingly simple as a misfolded protein can lead to such a catastrophic and fatal condition really underscores the incredible complexity and vulnerability of the human brain.
It's a stark reminder of how much we still don't know about the brain and how even the smallest disruptions can have the most profound and terrifying consequences.
It's humbling, isn't it, to think that something so small, so invisible to the naked eye, can unravel the very fabric of our being.
It certainly is. This deep dive into fatal insomnia has been a journey into the darkest corners of neurology, a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the terrifying power of disease.
Absolutely.
But while it's a scary and unsettling topic, I think it's crucial to shine a light on these rare conditions.
I agree.
To understand them better, not only for the sake of knowledge, but also to fuel the search for treatments and cures.
I agree. Knowledge is power, even when it forces us to confront our deepest fears.
Well said. As we conclude part two of our exploration, I'm left with a sense of awe at the brain's complexity, but also a profound sadness for those facing the devastating reality of fatal insomnia.
It's a mix of emotions that many people experience when confronted with the realities of such a terrifying and relentless disease. But it's important to remember that even in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges, the human spirit can be incredibly resilient. There's always hope, and the pursuit of knowledge and understanding is our most powerful weapon in the fight against these devastating diseases.
That's a powerful message to carry with us as we move into part three of our deep dive, where we'll explore what the future holds for research into fatal insomnia and what resources are available for those affected by this rare and relentless disease. Stay tuned. So we've spent the last two parts of this deep dive exploring fatal insomnia, a disease that robs you of sleep and slowly dismantles your mind and body. It's heavy stuff, but understanding these rare conditions is important not only to raise awareness, but also to fuel the search for treatments and cures. So, where do we go from here? What does the future hold for fatal insomnia research, and what can be done for those already affected by this terrifying disease?
Well, the current outlook is bleak, with no cure in sight. But the scientific community is not giving up. Research into prion diseases, including fatal insomnia, is ongoing, with scientists working tirelessly to understand these complex conditions and ultimately develop effective treatments.
It's a race against time, especially considering how rapidly this disease progresses once symptoms appear. What are some of the most promising avenues of research right now?
One area of intense focus is on early detection and diagnosis.
Okay.
The earlier we can identify the presence of these misfolded prion proteins, the better our chances of intervening before significant damage occurs. This involves developing more sensitive and specific diagnostic tests, perhaps even blood tests that can detect prions before symptoms even manifest.
That would be a game changer, wouldn't it? Early detection could potentially open a window for treatment, maybe even prevention before the disease takes hold. What about treatment options? Are there any potential therapies on the horizon?
Researchers are exploring a range of possibilities, though most are still in the early stages of development. Some are focused on finding ways to block the formation or accumulation of prions in the brain. Others are investigating drugs that might protect neurons from the damage caused by prions, and there's even research into ways to boost the body's own immune system to fight off these rogue proteins.
So there is hope, even if it's just a glimmer on the horizon. It's reassuring to know that scientists are pursuing every possible avenue. But in the meantime, what about the families currently facing this nightmare? What resources and support are available for them?
There are organizations dedicated to supporting families affected by prion diseases, including fatal insomnia. The National Organization for Rare Disorders, NRD, for example, provides information, resources, and connections to support groups in clinical trials. The Prion Alliance is another valuable resource, focusing on research and advocacy for prion diseases.
These organizations play a vital role, not only in offering practical assistance, but also a sense of community and hope to those who might otherwise feel isolated and overwhelmed. It's comforting to know that such support systems exist for these families.
Absolutely. These organizations are lifelines for many. They provide a wealth of information, connect families with others who understand their struggles, and advocate for more research and funding.
This deep dive into fatal insomnia has been a journey of mixed emotions. From fascination with the brain's complexity to the sobering realities of this devastating disease, we've learned about its causes, the horrifying symptoms, and the relentless progression that ultimately leads to death. We've even touched upon the very limits of human endurance when it comes to sleep deprivation. But perhaps the most important takeaway is that while there's currently no cure for fatal insomnia, research continues and hope remains. If something as seemingly simple as a misfolded protein can bring down the mighty human brain, imagine the incredible power and potential within that same brain to unlock the secrets of these diseases and one day conquer them. Until then, we must keep asking questions, searching for answers, and never give up hope. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into fatal insomnia.
Absolutely. Thank you.